and welcome to the Postmodern Art Podcast, the podcast dedicated to giving artists who are wowing the world over the platform they deserve. I'm your host, Aiden Ragland, and as we inch closer to Halloween on the year 2024, allow us to set sail and go through waves of both ocean and ghouls and ghosts as we bring you a conversation with a fantastic artist with an amazing webcomic you need to be reading today. Today's guest is Claire Niebergall, an award-winning animator, illustrator, and webcomic artist who has combined her love for the sea and otherworldly entities into the riveting webcomic Phantomarine. I became aware of Phantomarine recently, and I have been obsessed with it. It is a fantastic webcomic that I will not recommend enough. I cannot recommend enough. So it was really just a matter of getting Claire on here to talk about both my love for it and the love that she has for it, and talk about the amazing details, the amazing reception, everything about Phantomarine. Believe me when I say this is genuinely an amazing conversation that you are going to absolutely enjoy. I can almost guarantee it. If you enjoyed the conversation, please make sure you support Claire in the description below, especially checking out Phantomarine. Trust me, that's going to be the first link that you guys need to click on. If you enjoy the podcast, make sure you like, share, subscribe, or follow whatever audio streaming platform you prefer. Leave 5 stars wherever you can. You know what? See that stuff. You know it genuinely warms my heart. Speaking of subscribing, now is a better time more than ever to hit that subscribe button, because we are currently on the hunt to get 2,500 subs by the end of 2024. If we hit that goal, I will get my first tattoo as designed and decided by you, the community. So if you want to be part of that decision, subscribe today. And hey, if you want to go a little further with that support, may I recommend you check out the merch shop at fourthwall.com. We have some amazing designs as done by some outstanding artists, including the brand new logo merch as designed by the fantastic Roshan Galaxy. And you would look fantastic in this streetwear today, so I recommend you check out the shop with the link in the description below. But now, without further ado, please enjoy the Postmodern Art Podcast. Thank you so much for being here, by the way. I genuinely mean it whenever I said that I have been really invested in your stuff as of late. Like, it has become my newest obsession at this point. And so to get the chance to like talk to you and whatnot, this is incredible already. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it very much.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if nothing else, I wanted to make sure that I was aware of your stuff before I just invited you on, obviously. I don't want to be like one of those people that's like, all right, so we got Claire here. What exactly do you do again? Like, no, if I'm going to bring you on to highlight you or whatnot, I want to make sure I know what I'm talking about for the most part.
I'm prepared for anything. I've got the spiel kind of in my back pocket if I really need it, so there's no worries about that.
I mean, trust, especially because I made sure, especially this morning, to go through the stuff to make sure that I was ready or whatnot, and just like going through it again, seeing all the different interactions, all the characters and stuff like that, the details when it comes to like certain illustrations and stuff like that. Like I knew whenever you wanted to be on here, I knew this was gonna be a fun conversation at the end of the day.
I appreciate it. I'm excited to get into it. So yeah, go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Claire, before we really get going, I must ask the icebreaker question of the podcast, if I may. Let's say you get to go to a deserted island on your own accord. It's just you alone with your thoughts. You get to kick back, relax, breathe, get to really enjoy yourself for a little bit. With accommodations, it's not strictly stranded. It's like a little personal, B&B paradise away from society for a little bit. Mm-hmm. To make sure you don't go completely insane on this island, you can bring one piece of media or one piece of art with you to help with whatever kind of headspace you want on this island. If given this opportunity, what would that one piece be?
Gosh. Part of me almost wants to bring nothing because I feel like it's so difficult to disconnect in this day and age. And there have been many times where I've been like, I would love to go to an island and just sit and stare at the horizon for like a week. But I question how much I actually would be able to do that without going completely insane. My coworkers have actually just introduced me to Minecraft for the first time.
Oh, okay.
And we set up a big server for our entire studio to join if we wanted. And I've just been going in there and being like, there's so much to do here. So much, like, it's like 10 to 15 years of things that I've never been exposed to at all, really. So I would say Minecraft at this point.
It's so funny that you recently got introduced to Minecraft and such, because I recently got reintroduced to Minecraft recently, because
Nice.
with my group of friends and my girlfriend, they started like a Minecraft server together, and I'm like, you know what, I've been debating on getting Minecraft for like the longest time. Let me just get it so I can join them and such, because I played it years ago on the PlayStation, but it's been years since I even touched it. So
Mm.
like to get back into it and just like see the different terrains, all the stuff that they've added since I last played or whatnot, all the different elements that could kill me more than anything else. It's
Exactly.
there's a reason why it is the cultural phenomenon that it is, and it has lasted as long as it has.
I knew it was always huge, and I kind of absorbed a few things by like cultural osmosis over the years. But to actually get in there and start building things and messing around and seeing kind of all the recipes and formulas for certain things, I'm just like, oh, I get it. I
Mm-hmm.
get it. This is great.
And it's a good time to get into Minecraft, because now you can be ready for the live action Minecraft movie. Anyways,
I have some very newbie opinions on the art direction of the movie, but I will hold them for the final product. We'll see.
I'm just gonna say, whenever I saw that it was Warner Brothers that did it, I wasn't surprised, unfortunately.
I'm glad it's happening to some degree, but I wish it was in better hands.
You and me both. But regardless, Minecraft, that is your answer. You're locking that in.
Yes, I am.
Then if that's the case, I cannot think of a better way to start the Postmodern Art Podcast. Welcome everyone. I am your host, Nathan Ragland. Feel free to like, share, subscribe, or follow whatever audio streaming platform you prefer. You would look fantastic in the brand new merch that we have at the merch shop, fourthwall.com. Link to that is in the description below. Look at that beautiful little thing. Nice little logo as done by Roshan Galaxy. And follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, and TikTok at PostmodArtPod for future updates and guest announcements, including today's guest. She is an award-winning animator, illustrator, and webcomic artist who has combined her love for the sea and otherworldly entities in the riveting web series Phantomarine. Welcome to the podcast, Clam, better known as Claire Niebergall.
Hello, hello. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much for taking the time to be here, and hopefully I didn't butcher your last name too badly.
No, you did great. It's a hard one.
Thank you. How are you doing today, Claire?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I am doing fantastic now that I'm getting the opportunity to sit down and chat with you. Like I kind of illustrated before, if I leave it in, I have recently became so obsessed with Phantomarine, and I've just been absorbing every little aspect that I can get, because like I've seen hints of your stuff here and there beforehand, but really, not pun intended, really diving into that world
Hey.
has really been amazing, and I cannot tell you how much I love it, and I cannot wait to talk about it. But before we start into that, I do need to ask one question right off the bat. And this is quite possibly the most important question I'm going to be asking throughout the entire episode of the podcast.
Mm.
Have you found that perfect plate of Eggs Benedict yet?
Oh, goodness. Okay. See, I had one. I had one.
Oh.
And unfortunately, the place that used to serve it got killed by the pandemic.
Oh.
So it was wonderful, though. It was pulled pork. And it was absolutely fantastic. And luckily, it was right across the street from me. So I think I gained like 5 pounds just going there and having the Eggs Benedict every so often. And it was so good. I found a couple more that are similar later on, but oh, I miss it. There's several dishes that I miss from around town that are no longer with us, and that's one of them.
Dang it. Like you said, first off, you said pulled pork, and you had my heart like tied up and everything. Like, I'm just like, oh. I was going to say, I'm pretty sure the only time I can remember having like a really good plate of Eggs Benedict was whenever me and my mom and her roommate, we went to New Orleans. And there's this legendary shop. I think it's called like the Ruby Slipper or something along the lines of that.
I wonder if I've heard of it.
I was gonna say, like, they have like their own kind of spin on the Eggs Benedict, to where like they have it on like a biscuit or whatnot, and like, oh, it's just magnifique.
I find it's hard to make a bad one in some ways, unless you get like the basics wrong, but
Yeah,
there's so many
exactly.
things you can add to it.
It's one of those that, like, after a certain point, it's like you have to try in order to really mess that up. It's like pizza in a way, you know? Like, you have to really try to
Exactly.
screw up pizza, just like you have to try to screw up Eggs Benedict.
Hmm.
It's just one of those, I saw that in your profile as I was doing my research for you, and, like, I had to ask, because, like, I didn't know when was the last time you updated that profile, but still, I figured the search was still out there.
If anything, it started over, so
My heart, it breaks for you.
it's fine.
But with that important question out of the way, let's get to the rest of the interview, shall we? No. In all seriousness, no, it's fantastic to have you here, and I cannot wait to divulge into Phantomarine and all that stuff. But before we really divulge into what you're doing nowadays, I want to go back just a little bit and learn more or less the origin story of Claire. What got you interested into the arts of any sort in the first place?
Gosh, it's one of those things where it was kind of always there.
Okay.
Like I remember probably one of my earliest memories of my parents keeping anything that I made was do you know about those, like, it's like those little magnetic drawing boards where if you run like a pen across the surface, it'll basically, it's kind of, it's hard to describe. I don't remember what they were called, but I had a draw.
I know kind of. It was kind of like an etch a sketch in a way, but not really,
Yes.
right? Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
I know what
similar.
you're talking about.
And I had one where I drew a caterpillar, and I was like 2 or 3 years old. And of course, they were like, "This is amazing. We're going to take a photo of this." But I think, I don't know. I just always was drawing. I feel like, basically, long story short, I was kind of this overachiever in school from like day one.
Okay.
So I almost feel like the art kind of side of things was always there to kind of balance out, like, the okay, you have to do your work, but here's the fun. And I was always, I loved animated movies, and I loved video games, and I loved comics, and I loved everything from early on. And I always felt like even when I was, in school and learning things from lectures, like, I was drawing. And part of me wonders if it's something where like my hands just needed to move, so they were just doing that. And I've had teachers actually come back and email me saying, like, yeah, we noticed that you were drawing a lot, and we thought that that was initially bad, but like it helped you kind of to focus and to actually get your work done. And I don't know, I was always kind of two minds. And I was always drawing something. I had a book project that I was working on from like maybe like age 7 to age 12, that then I was just like, one day I was like, this is not very good, so I'm gonna shelf this. But then there was another one from like age 12 to age 20, and then I was like, this is also bad, I'm gonna shelf this. but all this sort of stuff to kind of build up this kind of creative library in my head of like, these are the things I love drawing, these are the things I love watching. And I never intended on going into animation. It was always something where I knew that going into just art in general would be difficult.
Right.
So as a kid, I tried to kind of be like, no, this is my hobby. This is something that I'm just going to do on the side forever. And that didn't really work out, as we can see.
As we can see by, you being here as an artist talking about the art that you're creating and such.
Exactly.
I love that, like, drawing has always been more or less like a part of you, like at the beginning of the day, because like you talking about like always drawing and like your notes and stuff like that. I remember I used to get in trouble because I would do like little doodles in like the margins, or I would draw stuff instead of actually paying attention and doing schoolwork sometimes.
My thing was always having the little like 3x5 note cards underneath whatever book I was supposed to be reading from, and I would slide it out and like doodle and then slide it back. So by the end, like, the graphite had smudged horribly, but I was like, yes, I was drawing during class.
Oh, you rebel, how dare you.
Oh no.
I was also curious, you said that you've always had a love for, animated movies and comics and video games, stuff like that. What was some of the early, like, media that you remember specifically, like, loving and clinging on to and just, like, appreciating to no end?
Unfortunately, to my family's chagrin, I when I was 3 or 4, I was obsessed with the Beetlejuice cartoon.
Oh,
And
okay.
because it came out, I think, right when I was born, basically, and it was in syndication for a few years following that. So I was I think they watched a few episodes of it and they're just like, this is a little bit much for a 3-year-old. And even then, like, I watch it now and I'm like, maybe. It's a little scary in certain spots, but it's mostly silly. But I was obsessed with that. There was a cartoon of the Ghostbusters that I also really
Yes.
loved. So like the theme is kind of already solidified by the time I'm 3. It's like she likes creepy things and ghosts and all the things that a 3-year-old probably shouldn't really like.
I mean, you say that, but I mean, like, you know, have you seen what some of the 3-year-olds are able to find these days on like YouTube and stuff like that? Yeah, I mean,
That is that is a whole other, oh my gosh. I'm glad for the accessibility of the internet, but sometimes I'm just like, oh no. Oh no.
no, that is extremely valid. That's extremely interesting way to look at it. I'm so glad. First off, how timely is it to talk about Beetlejuice, especially around this time or whatnot?
Oh, I've been spoiled. I with the musical coming out and the new movie coming out. I haven't seen it yet, but I want to.
Oh,
I really want to see it.
obviously I'm not going to spoil it for you, but I'm gonna let you know right now. It is good. It is really good.
Okay.
Is a very fun time at the end of the day. It is what you could hope for with a Beetlejuice sequel. Okay, like it is
Then
that
I
good.
want to see it definitely.
Oh goodness, me and my girlfriend went to go see it, and like, what was funny is my girlfriend didn't realize going into it that this was a sequel. She thought this was like a reboot or something along the lines of that.
Oh,
Uh, but at the same time, like we watched it or whatnot. She realized it, and we were both just like laughing at like certain points. Like it was so wonderful, all the different ways that like Tim Burton like unleashed his creativity into the film, and the performances were just top notch. Like everyone, like you loved who you loved, you hated who you were supposed to hate. Like it was very well done. I cannot recommend it enough. Um,
I'm so excited. I really want to see it.
you should, you absolutely should. Now, thinking to obviously all these good early inspirations and stuff, especially the ghost stuff, which we will touch upon in a bit. I'm curious, when did it go from just this general love and appreciation for art and just like wanting to draw to a passion and truly wanting to make it your career?
Again, somewhat accidentally,
Okay.
but at the same time, it worked out okay, and I think it was meant to happen this way. I so for ages and ages, like I was drawing, but I was just like, okay, it's over here. I'm gonna do something else as like my actual career.
Mm-hmm.
So I originally went to university. They had a program there that was called Digital Media Design, which was a
Okay.
combination of computer science and art.
Mm.
So a lot of people from that program go on to Pixar or DreamWorks or other companies, basically as like more technical behind the scenes artists. So dealing with all sorts of problems or crashes or rendering errors, just kind of the more coded side of things, I guess, rather than like I'm, animating a character.
Right.
And I was always really good at all the sciences in school, but I learned I was not good at computer science. And
Mm.
I tried really hard, but eventually I had one teacher that took me out for coffee and he was just like, look, what do you love doing when you wake up in the morning? And I'm like, I like drawing. And he's like, you have to do that because what I like doing when I get up in the morning is computer science. And if you don't want to basically have your entire life be like, oh, I'm waking up to do something that I'm only half good at and I don't like, then you're going to be miserable.
Mm-hmm.
And I was lucky in that I could step back and my parents were very supportive, just being like, okay, she looks miserable. Let's try something else. So I basically transitioned out of that program and into one that was just pure art, but with a combination of like graphic design and animation. So I could kind of have something to fall back on if I really needed to.
Right.
Unfortunately, the program in my university was very like not in terms of like bad animation, but very much like, okay, you're going into a museum and you're seeing art installations where you've got like cubes rotating in space, very much like kind of avant-garde,
Yep.
like, which is completely valid, but you're probably not going to get a job doing that sort of thing if you really like truly like commercial animated movies, which I still liked.
Yeah.
So I ended up I did that program and it was great and I learned a bunch, but then I came up to Vancouver for a 1 year certificate diploma program that basically like supplemented that sort of thing.
Okay.
And that was very much like, we are a program that is going to teach you like how to make these characters act and move, and you could hopefully get a job right out of school. And I did. And I was just kind of like, okay, I guess this is working now. This is fine. And I've been up in Vancouver ever since and worked on a bunch of animated movies, and then just started drawing again and got kind of a side gig along the way.
First off, we gotta give credit where credit is due to those teachers that just pulled you aside and be like, "Look, we see this isn't it. Like, we're not telling you to just stop, but like find something else because we can tell you're not loving this." Like,
Yeah.
I always love and appreciate like when the professors, especially in college, like are actually like real and legit with you. Like, I don't know how well your high school experience was, but like I think everyone has that same generic high school experience where it's like the teachers are always like supporting you. So it's like, yeah, you could go, like, go do this, go do that. You just gotta keep working. And in college, they're at least like honest with you. He's like, look, this is hard. If you love it, like, we're gonna help you. If not, just get your grade, and get out.
Exactly. And there were some that clearly like they were just like, I don't care, just fail and get out of my sight.
That too.
But basically,
That too.
it's like I think I think it's really difficult looking back, because at the very least I had like a trajectory of kind of what I wanted to do, and a lot of kids don't have any idea what they want to do, and you're forced at age 18 to be like, pick your path forever.
Right.
And I find that's so, it's difficult. So to have somebody come in and be like, let's have an actual talk about this before it's not that you can't change things even further into the industry. Like, I've had friends that did computer science for like 5 years at Pixar or whatever, and then they're like, you know what, I'm miserable, I'm gonna go and do something else. And that's fine too.
That's extremely valid. I know for me, I think I mentioned this a couple weeks ago on an episode, but I know for me, I didn't really know what I really wanted to until I got to college. Like, I had rough ideas obviously growing up, and we all have like that dream job that we have at like 6 years old or whatnot. Like, I'm gonna be president of the United States. No.
Yeah.
And then, like, in high school, I'm thinking, like, I'm gonna be a video game designer. Oh God, the math. Like, you could probably attest to this for someone that was studying computer science. The math alone gives you so many headaches.
I was not built for it. I find it fascinating, and people that can actually do it, I'm just like, oh, it's wonderful. But I would rather be the one to like draw the assets of your wonderful game rather than like, I don't want to touch any technical stuff with it. I can't do it.
Exactly. It wasn't until I got to college thinking I was actually going to go to like reporting and stuff, which, ironic considering the fact I'm kind of being a reporter right now. But like, I also went to school and I realized, oh wait, filmmaking is a thing? I thought it was just a bunch of people kind of like, if you know the person, congratulations, you're in the industry, which isn't wrong, but
Exactly. But there are pathways into it for those that, like, it's almost kind of like, there are brick walls around the industry, but how willing are you to basically punch through or, spoon your way through to get into it?
or attempt to climb over, or attempt to dig under it. Either way, like,
Yeah.
you can find some way to weasel your way in the industry. You're set.
Exactly.
And speaking of said industry, like, whenever I looked more into your portfolio and stuff and saw some of the animated works that you've been able to have a hand in, I was both amazed and intrigued with some of the cool stuff. I think, like, the first one obviously we want to talk about, it's not even really much of an animated film, but like the aspects of it that you worked, I kind of have an idea how you had a hand in it. You had a hand in Captain America, the Winter Soldier.
I started basically at the peak of what my portfolio. That was my first job right out of school. I had a friend that worked at a studio in town, and I had applied for just dozens of jobs around town, just being like, please hire me so I don't have to go home to the States.
Right.
And yeah, they brought me in and they were just like, can you animate a shield bouncing around? And I'm like, probably. so, so it was more than that eventually, but there was a lot of I guess like digi-double work where you had characters, flipping through the air when normal humans shouldn't be able to do that, or lots of stuff with I guess it would be so interesting. Like it felt redundant where you would get a live action clip of of Captain America or his stunt double on a motorcycle, and you would have to actually put the motorcycle into the scene and put him on the motorcycle, like a CG version of him, so they could simulate like dirt and dust going around him.
Right.
Like they wouldn't do it on set. There were so many things where I was just like, why didn't they do this on set? But you learn very quickly they want to have ultimate control over all these different aspects of the shot. Mm-hmm. So it was far less, I guess, on the side of like acting or making a character, look appealing in camera. It was more just like a technical sort of job.
Right.
But I had done a shot on my school demo reel that was basically rotoscoped animation of two characters dancing.
Okay.
And they were like, she can do that. Let's bring her on board. So I was only there for like 2 or 3 months, but I learned a ton. I learned a ton about the things that I had not known going into it, which was you learn on the job. But that was my first full-time gig. And I remember having kind of this thought going into the industry of like, okay, I'll be happy when I can walk through an airport and see a kid that has like an action figure of a character that I animated or something. And it happened like immediately. So I'm like, well, what do I do now? I don't know.
I will say I have kind of a rough idea of what exactly you're talking about when it comes to like the technical rotoscoping stuff, or like what you kind of had to do. I recently went to a talk that had Gendy Tartakovsky at, and he was talking about his experience at Iron Man 2, because he apparently did like the CGI for the third act of that film, which I didn't even realize until I got there. I'm like, wait, you did that? So like,
oh gosh,
so like seeing like the basically the rough like CG animation and stuff, like how it's supposed to be set up, and then like what the editors did eventually afterwards or whatnot, like it gave me a whole new love and respect for the people that do that kind of stuff. So like, especially hearing how you had a hand in that, and hearing how much of a learning experience it was at the end of the day, like I have a new level of appreciation for what you did for that film and such. So
it's kind of invisible stuff, like it's meant to be invisible, and that's what good VFX is. But it's there, and I think I'm glad that most people nowadays know that it exists, even if they don't know exactly what's being done. So that's great.
And now we go from something that's invisible to something that's probably a little too visible. You knew we had to, you knew we had to talk about it. You knew we had.
Here we go.
How did you get an opportunity to work on the acclaimed, air quotes, animated film Sausage Party? How did this opportunity come to you to work on that?
Same as a lot of other ones. I just applied to random studios around town once I was done with Captain America, because I was just like, okay, I want to see if I can still stay here, because I was I didn't have my permanent residence or citizenship at that point. So like, you have to keep working or going to school essentially to be able to stay in Canada.
Right.
So I just got a message, and they were like, hey, you're a junior, want to come work on this Seth Rogen R-rated animated movie? And I'm just like, okay, let's see what this is all about. And it was, I have so many stories about it, but essentially, like, I kind of knew going in, I'm like, okay, this is not going to be my jam.
Right.
This is not my sort of thing. But at the same time, like, the people that I worked with were wonderful. All of everybody that was on the animation team was so, like, we were kind of like friendships forged in fire, essentially. like we were just kind of like, okay, this is insane. But I learned a ton on it. It is what it is, and it's not something that I would, kind of tell my kids about potentially until they're like 15 at the very least. But like, I'm happy that it happened, and it's one of the best like Like if you're at a party and it's like, tell us one, interesting fact about yourself, and I'm just like, oh, I've already got one. I've always got one.
I was gonna say, like, especially with how unique of a film that is or whatnot, like just the fact that you can say, oh yeah, I worked on this film, and especially like if people know you or whatnot, or at least know what you're known for, they hear that and like, I'm not gonna lie, I had that moment of like a double take, like, wait, huh, where? Oh, you know what? Okay, cool. You know what? Respect. Money is money. A paycheck's a paycheck.
And it was like it was fine, and like there's stories about how everything turned out at the end that I that they're in kind of even more insane. But like I made tons of good industry friends and connections on that movie, and again, whenever I bring it up now, I always have somebody be like, "Wait, what?" And I'm like, "Yeah."
I'm
Yeah.
I'm almost scared to ask some of those stories, but I figured we have so many other better stories that we can get onto at a different time.
I also don't know if the threat of me being blacklisted is still like in effect, because that was something that was threatened, and I was just like, well, it never happened, but like oh god.
The fact that there was even the threat of it in the first place is something that I'm already like, huh?
It was its own whole thing, and I've kept very much like quiet about it intentionally, just because you never know. But like things happened and things went down, and I'm glad that the conversation started to happen because it was sorely needed, and I know that it's actually led to a bunch of changes in policy, at least around Vancouver,
Right.
in the animation industry. So I'm just like, good. At the very least, like good things came out of it, and I'm really happy about that.
If nothing else, we could save it for the tell-all like memoir that you're gonna be writing like 20 years from now or something like that.
Oh gosh, the sordid details.
I mean, and obviously you weren't blacklisted because you did get an opportunity to work on some other projects, most notably, or at least the most recent one that I could find, you got a chance to work on Detective Pikachu, which I think is really cool.
I did. That's one of my favorites. It was a rare opportunity to work on anything Pokemon related in North America. Like it's really, really cool. I think more things have come up nowadays where Pokemon, the company, will actually approach smaller studios and be like, make a short for us, or help us with this particular project. But that was one where I was just like, you mean I can animate this in Canada? It was so cool, and I wish I could go back in time and tell like baby Claire, it's like, you're gonna animate Mewtwo, it's gonna be awesome, and then just disappear through the portal and be like, hey, bye, and it's like, wait, what do you mean? What do you mean?
like just hearing that alone, I could already tell how surreal of an experience it was working on that film more than anything else. Like, it was certainly a unique concept in the first place with that, obviously, the blend of the realism with the CGI and stuff. But, like, regardless, it's Pokemon. You get to work on Pokemon. You get to bring these characters that I imagine for you growing up, absolutely loved to cannot get enough of. Trust me, I was one of those kids. I grew up, I loved it. I could not get enough of Pokemon. To see them in this fun, interesting light with this fun little concept that started off as a, simple DS game or whatnot, like, it had to blow your mind at the end of the day.
I was amazed that it was actually that one was getting made, like of all the different things that they could have done. Yeah, I was like, this is so interesting and unique, and yet I thought it worked really well as a movie in the end, and I'm happy to have been part of it.
Absolutely. I mean, that's one of the films that people like, if you love it, you really love it. Although I will say, I don't know how you feel about this, but as much as I love Ryan Reynolds, we really dropped the ball on Danny DeVito voicing Pikachu. Just saying.
I do agree. I love him too, and I think he brings Ryan Reynolds brings like an appropriate amount of snark, but it's a different kind of snark that I think people expected. So I would love. I feel like I saw a few like fan edits of Danny DeVito voicing Detective Pikachu. There, I was just like, that would have been great, but star power, I guess.
Yep, star power, regardless. And amid all of these different stuff that we're talking about, all these different opportunities in animations, leads me to wonder, when did you get the opportunity to really delve into the world of webcomics? Like, when did webcomics start becoming a thing for you in the first place?
So I was always aware of them. It's weird. Like I grew up on old DeviantArt, like, and there were
Yep,
a
yep.
lot of webcomics that kind of got their start there as like page by page weekly updates. They didn't have their own website. They didn't have like Tapas and Webtoon were not a thing back then,
Right.
and I was not even aware of those until I had started this webcomic.
Mm-hmm.
So I was out of the loop basically from like 2008 to like 2015, which is like I was just in college and I was unaware of how things were changing. But yeah, I remember there were lots of ones where I started seeing really high quality stuff being done. Like the one that I remember earliest on was The Meek. I don't know if you
Okay.
know that one.
Can't say I do off the
If
top of my head.
it's absolutely like I web comics before then were kind of maybe like pixel art stuff or not as polished, but that's one where I started being like, this is actually like professional and it's a web comic. And I remember just looking at the weekly updates and just being like, this is gorgeous.
Yeah.
And I kind of carried that forward as like the metric of like, okay, if I ever do anything like that, I would love it to look kind of like that in terms of quality. Excuse me. But what happened was I like this is my first webcomic. Phantomarine is the first one I ever did, and a lot of
Okay.
people have kind of failed ones or other ones that they've done beforehand. But I was in the middle of Sausage Party, and I was just like, okay, I'm in the industry. This is going to be a long contract. I'm not working on something that I really love. I need something that I can work on that's going to be like the side project that essentially like refuels the tanks as I'm going back and forth from work.
Right, right.
Um, and I started doing it, and I think it was at the time where a lot of people were starting to think about like, oh, indie animation and you can do your own stuff, which has now blossomed into something absolutely massive. But even I knew at that point, I'm like, I don't want to animate it. I'm already animating for my day job, and it's a
Okay.
lot of work, and I know that the logistics of it would be extremely difficult. But I just started drawing, and I remember I wrote down like 4 ideas of like, here's something that would be cool to draw, and one of them was like something about ghost pirates. And I was just like, okay, that's kind of combining all the things that I like. Why don't I try that? And I just did some doodles, and soon enough, like it took a while, it took maybe a year or so to get all of the basics together. Like I didn't just start putting out pages immediately because I was like, I need this to like pickle in my head a little bit.
Right.
But yeah, in the in the middle of a movie like that, this popped out of the mud.
And if that's one good thing to come out of that movie and that experience more than anything else, I think that's it's good. I want to say what's the word I'm looking for? Not revenge, but like consolation prize. There you go. That's the word I'm looking for.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's enough time. We've tiptoed around it just enough. Let's just get into the real meat and potatoes of this conversation that I really want to talk about. I want to talk about Phantomarine. Now,
I think I can do that.
I'd like to hope so. I hope I brought the right person to talk about Phantomarine more than anything else. Now, for those that may have no idea what in the world we're talking about, even before we started this conversation, how would you describe Phantomarine to people?
Okay, I've got my log line memorized in my head. It's a spooky but sweet fantasy webcomic about a ghostly princess who has to sail across a haunted ocean to save her soul from a death god known as the Red Tide King.
Beautiful, gorgeous, stunning, love it, cannot get enough of it. We already kind of got an idea of how at least the idea sort of more or less formulated to be, but I want to know more or less like the inspiration behind it. You said you kind of had love for like ghost stuff, and you kind of had a love for, I guess ocean stuff as well. What exactly? How did those two loves like more or less grow? I know you kind of more or less like teased it with talking about Beetlejuice and Ghostbusters stuff like that, but how did those two loves separately kind of develop on its own, and how did you find a way to combine them into this very unique concept?
It just kind of again, it just kind of felt like it happened and it was natural. Like I've always loved the ocean. I've always loved water. I never grew up around it. But
Okay.
anytime that there was like some sort of place to go where it's like, oh my God, there's a fountain, or oh, we're going to the ocean or going to the beach, or oh, there's a river. Like I'm lucky now, I can look out at the water every day and I'm just like, oh, yay, it's wonderful. But I don't know, it was just always something. Like again, you probably ask my family and they're like, we don't know where that came from. Like, is this a past life, like poking through where she was a sailor? I have no idea. But I always also loved the color blue, which was another thing where it's just like she's obsessed with ghosts, she's obsessed with the color blue, and she's obsessed with water. So like if you knew me when I was a kid and now you see what I'm making now, I'm just like, this is obvious. Like nothing has changed. Character arc is flat, basically.
I mean, I at the very least I would say it's flat. I would say it's more or less come full circle at the end of the day, because like obviously that the love for like the ghost stuff and the ocean stuff, like kind of leading to this, like I said, absolutely riveting webcomic that I personally cannot get enough of. I mean, if that's not the definition of full circle moment, I need to reread the dictionary and figure out that definition. um like I just want to like dig a little deeper when it comes to that. Like, what is it about? Like, what is it about ghosts, and what is it about the ocean, just in particular, that like it just intrigues you? Like, it keeps bringing you back into it. Like, obviously the love is always there, but like, what are the elements of it that you just crave to like know more of or to like absorb?
It's funny how I don't think I really knew what it really was until I started getting the comic out there and people started coming to me with like kind of this sense of, okay, you're either fascinated with the ocean and you're just like, oh, it's mysterious and what's beneath, like what's going on down there, you cannot see it. But you also get a lot of people that have thalassophobia, which is
Oh, yeah.
like if all these images of like there's a giant sea creature like about to break the surface and eat your entire boat. And I never really put that together as like, okay, there's kind of this, it feels terrifying in one way but beautiful in another.
Right.
And I don't know, I think ghost stuff is always like, I was never super into like the truly horror side of things. I've got a couple friends that do horror web comics where they're like, yeah, I go full on with, scary imagery, and I'm like, no, it's more the whimsical kind
Yeah.
where, yeah, like I guess, I don't know. People say that the comic looks very Disney, and I'm like, I don't know about that necessarily, but I don't mind it. But it is very much like this is something where if you're a kid and you like spooky things, like you could read this. And I have seen one of my favorite memories from a Comic Con that I did was a little girl came in with, I think she had like four older brothers and they were all under like 12 years old and she was the youngest. She opened up like to the scariest page of the comic and she was just like, it's so cool. And I'm like, oh no.
I love how she found the scariest page, and it's like, this is so cool. I feel like in the back of your mind, you're like, oh, it only goes downhill from here when it comes to scary factor.
And yet like it's still something where like I liked that kind of stuff. Like it all depends on, it's not like necessarily a maturity thing, but it's more like how do you respond to scary stuff, or even if it's kind of the more silly kind of scary. I like the idea of like in the comic you can go back and forth between the silly stuff, funny stuff, but then it can go really quickly into like, no, I'm actually serious, and the skull faces come out and things get
Yeah.
terrifying. And I like I another oh gosh, yeah, I don't know if I should have mentioned this a while ago, but one other piece of media that affected me growing up. Have you ever heard of a cartoon called Reboot?
Yes, I've heard of it and I've seen clips of it, but I never had an opportunity to like actually sit down and watch it. I've heard so many things about it.
It's one of my favorites. It got me basically into animation as it is.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a character in that show. I don't know if people would know her. She's she's one of the coolest characters I've ever seen. She has a mask for a face that
Oh.
switches back and forth, and she's not like a ghost, but there is something kind of ghostly and scary about that. Like, she can be very silly but then switch very quickly into something that's scary, and I like that sense of, like, I guess, yeah, combining like ghosts and the unknowable sea and all this other stuff, where like just this sense of like it's beautiful but dangerous
Yeah. That that
and
that
always interesting.
that unique duality of like finding the grace but also finding the horror that comes with ghosts in the sea and stuff like that, because like that those elements, especially if you look into it, like there's so much you can dive into. I mean, like Ghost alone, like the grace of it is like learning about the history of these spirits and stuff like that, and just how exactly they live in this afterlife. But that's also
Mhm.
partially the horror of it, of like the history, how exactly they died, and like finding out how they live in their environment, which could potentially, harm you if you're disrupting their environment and such,
Exactly.
I mean, like the ocean alone, like how many times have we had so many people that are so scared of the sea just because of what they don't know is in there? I mean, one of the most successful films of all time was about the unknowns that is in the sea with Jaws. I mean, that alone
Yes.
is a good emphasis of that.
Mhm, exactly. And then you even get, like, the sea has been used for so many different metaphors, like even something like Titanic. Like, you are
Yeah.
not immune to the horrors of the sea, no matter how much money or prestige you have. Like, if you hit the wrong thing or if you run into the wrong entity, you're done.
Yep.
It's amazing.
Straight up was like unsinkable my ass.
We'll see about that. Exactly.
let's let's see what we can do here about this. I think what you're kind of more or less hinting at, it leads to one of the elements that I absolutely love about this webcomic. The world building that you have developed for the world of Phantomarine. Like, I am amazed with the world you've more or less developed. Like, all the different elements, the different kinds of people, the the different entities of gods and beings and such, like the way that it works. Like, how much time have you developed to this webcomic just for the world building alone, like just making sure that you found a way to like properly set it up to where it looks like a unique, different functioning society?
Oh gosh, it's funny how in my mind it's not as much as other people think. And I was watching Brandon Sanderson had a series of videos that he had released where he was talking about like world building as an iceberg.
Mm-hmm.
And you essentially have, you have an iceberg and you can see it from the surface and it looks absolutely enormous. And if that's kind of your world, you you're only showing the surface. You're only showing the most important aspects of that world to give it that sense of dimensionality and like it feels alive. But when you look inside the iceberg, it's hollow. And it's not really something that feels bad necessarily. It feels human. Like I'm not Tolkien. Like I don't have, infinite time, infinite, I guess, expertise to build entire worlds and languages and things like that. So when you want to build something, but you don't have all of those resources or brain power, like you can just make kind of the scaffold around it, and people will still be like, okay, it's enough where I know what you're going for, and it still feels fully realized enough where somebody could write a fan fiction about it or make a fan comic and be like, I'm building off of what you've shown me, even if it's not, like if people will ask me questions on Tumblr, and I'm just like, sometimes I'm just like, I don't know the answer to that. I don't know what education is like in my world, like, because it's not something that's shown up in the story itself so much. And there's a variety of different things that are kind of like that, but it still is good to kind of be given those questions and be like, okay, I do need to think about this.
Yeah.
Or even if I don't have to, it's still good to think about. So kind of, yeah, it's there and people can see, everything that I've done. And I feel like I've done enough to make it juicy, I guess. But if you were to, really go into my head, it's kind of like, no, that's it. Like that, maybe there's a few things that I'm still figuring out, or things that will not show up in the story proper that are cool to think about. But like my favorite thing is like people ask me for a map of the world, and I don't know if you saw this. And like in my head, I know roughly the shape because it's like a circle of archipelagos around a
Right.
central ocean, and there's a wall around it. But I've named like the only places that we're going to go in the story. So like I have whole swaths of the map where I'm like, I don't know what's happening here. I don't know what's happening here. And some people from my Discord photoshopped in just Europe as as a continent. And I'm just like, you know what? That's completely fair. There might be Europe in here, and I'm who am I to say no to that?
There's always a Europe somewhere in these things, all right?
Exactly.
Oh, that's insane. Because like I'm thinking about, first off, you like even just by you saying that like you may not have like the full structure, but you at least get the scaffolding. Some pretty big structure that you have in the way as is, because you have really like developed a lot as is. Like even with what you have with like the places that are important and such, that basic worldview, some of the different aspects, the different kinds of gods and such, you've developed basically an entire new language based on the gods that every time I look at it, I'm like, okay, what level of Minecraft do I need to go into in order to figure out like what these incantations are supposed to be? Like, I am genuinely amazed with like, even though I'm like, with how much you have been able to develop, with how much you have been able to devote into this, the quality of it is just absolutely mind-blowing at the end of the day. Like I cannot tell you how much that like I look over these details and such, and I'm just like, how do you have the time in the first place to even consider half of this stuff?
I'm in a way I'm very fortunate that I don't have any other things in my head in terms of other stories. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's one of the things that I find, because I've got a group of friends that also do web comics, and we all talk about, you know, like, oh, what other story ideas do you have for, you know, future things? And I'm just like, this is it. That's it. Like I've basically like I don't have what they call plot bunnies in my head, where
Right.
like you feel something forming and you're like, oh, suddenly a new shiny, like I need to go and draw this instead, and you disappear for like 3 years drawing this comic, and then you're like, oh yeah, I'll go back to this one. Like I have one, and I guess I can put all of my thought into it. Like I think also just if you look at it from just a very technical viewpoint, like I keep it kind of simple. Like I've got two gods.
Mm-hmm.
The language that they speak is still English. It's just like a substitution cipher. So like you can decode almost everything they've said already. It's not like an Elvish sort of thing where it's got its own dialects and all these things. Like it's just English. And I've just got like two factions essentially. Like they're fleshed out, but it's something where I wanted to. It doesn't take a lot actually to, I guess, flesh out things, as long as you're working from like just there's a couple of big things about the world, and then you can kind of break those down into smaller elements. So
Right.
I don't know. I've thought about it for, this is my 10th year working on the comic. So this
Goodness.
upcoming, it's been a while, and I was also very lucky in that the first chapter took me 3 years to draw. I was not on any sort of time frame or anything like that, so I used that time to think about the world and the characters and kind of what I wanted it to say, because I knew I had like a vibe of what I wanted to go for, but in terms of the kind of where everything would end up, it's actually funny. I always knew where things would end up, but I didn't know really what it meant exactly. And now I'm like, I know what it means. I know kind of the theme of the story, and that's something where I think a lot of people actually forget that theme can do a lot of lifting
Yes,
in
it
terms
can.
of like you don't need something that's super strong, but it even just having like a single sentence of like, this is the theme as the framework can kind of lend a lot of credibility to otherwise kind of disparate elements, because people can always be like, okay, it's coming back to this theme. And I like that a lot. And I always encourage somebody to be like, if you're kind of lost on what your story is supposed to be, think about what it's either telling you it's trying to be or what you want it to be. And I think that's a really important thing to do.
Absolutely, more than anything. I mean, like, especially now that you're saying, especially like, all these big elements, you just got to break it down. Like, you go from there to kind of, I guess, pure inverse pyramid down to like all the tiny details or whatnot. Like, especially as long as we get to that basic theme that you're talking about at the end of the day, like, I can easily see how it could potentially be like that. I'm just amazed with I'm just amazed with like how stunning it is, and how detailed it is, at least from someone that's first experiencing this stuff. I mean, for you, like, you've been working on this stuff, like I said, for close to 10 years at this point. Like, I can imagine you can look at it and be like, yeah, this is, not discrediting you obviously, but like just being like, yeah, this is this kind of element, this is this kind of thing, like we go from this or from like that. For me, someone that this is basically my first time delving into this stuff, I'm just like, oh my god, look at this, look at that, look, like, what's this? There's magic in the air.
The reread is always something that I hear people talk about, where they'll read it through first, and then they'll reach a point where they're like, something's wrong.
Yeah.
Something's wrong. And like you end up like, you read through the whole thing and then you go back and you're like, okay, I need to read with certain things in mind, and I need to look at the comment section. And then you see like the comment section is all these people being like, what is happening? What's going on? I don't understand. And I never realized how many people would actually just go back and have kind of the reevaluation be a part of the storytelling, and people will pop into the server and the Discord server and be like, guys, what's happening? I don't know what's going on. And I'll be like, welcome, sit. We've got things to discuss.
Come on in. We have tea. You can get along.
Yeah.
I mean, I know I certainly had some of those moments the more I certainly read, especially with the most recent chapter that you've published or whatnot. I definitely had a lot of those moments. I'm like, wait, what? No. Oh my god. Like, I'm thinking back to early moments. That makes so much sense. Like, what? Huh? Who? Where? Huh? Like, look at you being smug. Just to be like, this is exactly how I planned it.
Oh, that's basically the primary motivator of this whole thing. Like, some people, they'll write for like catharsis, or they'll be like, oh, I want to make something cool. I'm just like, no, I want to mess with people. But like, kindly.
Oh yeah, no.
There's
a difference. There's a difference between messing with people and just being mean. You're just messing with them. If you were being mean, you could just mess with these people in so many different directions, in so many different ways.
I have no intentions to be mean in terms of like everything that I've promised, I'm going to follow through on if I can. Yeah. Like, there's no sense of like, oh, she's going to pull the rug out from under us and it's going to be a completely different thing. Like, no, I've dropped my breadcrumbs very intentionally, so that if you've gotten to the end of maybe the first, second, third chapter and you're like, okay, I'm on board, then I'm like, you will be satisfied with where things go. If it's not for you, then it's not for you. But right. I don't have every single detail figured out. I don't have it like memorized in my brain. I don't have a full script, but I know enough places where I'm like, I should drop a little hint there, or like even just something like in the background of one page where I'm just like, people are going to find that in like 5 years. It's going to be great.
I mean, I think a certain thing that definitely helps with that storytelling and that kind of like, I guess, shock and awe of the storytelling is the characters you have introduced and really let the audience get attached to in one form or of another. Like, how important was it for you to have these kind of like characters that you've more or less developed, these complex, unique characters with all these different elements? Because I imagine that was a whole entire like Herculean task just to make sure you have the proper characters to tell this story.
I was lucky that I had some guidance partially through, because in terms of kind of full realization of characters, only a few of them kind of popped into my head fully realized, and even then there was kind of some back and forth. But I ran into trouble with Phaedra, who's the main character, the main character of the comic. But it really has three main characters. But I have a friend who I visited maybe like 7-8 years ago, and we went on a long walk in the woods, and she has her own story as well. And I was just talking about, I'm like, I don't know how to make her interesting, like, because I hadn't finished the first chapter yet. I was like, I don't know what her arc is really going to be. I know what her personality is like,
right,
but I don't know where she's going. And my friend looked at me, she's like, Claire, you have to make her a hot mess.
Yes.
And I'm like,
yes.
Oh. and she's like, listen, every character in some way is a hot mess, like, unless they're a perfect character from the start, or they're, you know, just meant to be like a symbolic sort of character.
Right.
But like, you have to have a character that's like, I don't know what I'm doing. I've been thrown into this adventure. I have to figure it out. I might be changed along the way. And I think having my friend basically tell me, like, it's okay to make a character that is wrong and is like, she's not a bad person. She just has kind of preconceived notions of what the world is like and what is true. And a lot of the comic is revealing that untruth over the course of time. And I remember it was kind of a gamble, because I wondered if people would respond poorly to her, because she's a teenager. She doesn't know, you know, she's a teenager from, you know, she's a princess.
Yeah.
She knows very little about the true nature of the world. The audience kind of knows it, but they're watching this character and they're like, to have this sensation of like, you want to grab her by the shoulders and be like, no, like, what are you doing? And I think that's something, it's difficult with webcomics because they're so slow, that you actually will find people that are like, I don't like this character. I'm not willing to wait around another 5 years for her to learn things. But I had very little reception like that. So I think people kind of trust that I'm going to change things over time, and she's going to learn things and get better and hopefully get very cool. We'll see.
I mean, I know, at least in my reading experience, the only character that I can say I quote unquote hate right now is Halia. But it's one of those, I love to hate her because of the recent chapter. I don't hate her because she's a bad character. I love her because she's a bad character, you know?
And that was my intention. Like, even her whole story, which I will not spoil here.
Right.
But you know, like, I didn't know who she really was, even until like halfway through this last chapter. Like, I knew who she was, but I didn't know why she was doing things. I didn't know kind of the intricacies of her motivations. Those are all things that I had a rough idea of, but like, you don't know sometimes until you actually start drawing things. Like, a lot of what I do, I can't really just write. I have to physically draw it to understand it. And with her, like, it was actually a difficult chapter in a way, because I'm like, you suck. But at the same time, like, it's
like you're horrible. Go on.
Yep. And like, it was so funny, because even before I revealed anything, I had friends of mine that were just like, I love her, I want to marry her. I'm like, do not do that. No. But even after now revealing things, they're like, I still want to marry her and marry her even more. I'm like, oh. But at the same time, I understand. Sometimes you're just like, you know what? You're like, the characters that are awful but are delightful at being awful. Yeah. Those are often so much fun. And like, as long as you're willing to be like, okay, in real life, no, but here, yeah, like, it's great.
Look, all I'm just saying is, if things go out the way that if things go out in the ideal world for some of the characters in that story, Silas is a very lucky person.
He's an idiot.
Oh, he is a major idiot. But if things go out the way that they want it to go, he would be a lucky man. But
I
but has
I'm
but I think you and I both
God.
know that's not how it's gonna go down. That's not the
Oh,
ideal
we're
way.
Hot Mess exists in many forms in this
Yes.
comic, and he's also one of them. I've gotten more and more kind of people being like, I want to know what his deal is, and I'm like, oh boy, here we go. Like that's gonna be fun later on. So I'm glad that I introduced him and I introduced this like Yzma Kronk dynamic, but
Yep.
worse.
But
I'm just
yes, that that is the best way to describe that dynamic. Just Yzma Kronk, but somehow just more toxic.
yep, I'm here for it.
And speaking of hot messes, there's one hot mess, or I guess in this case, several hot messes that we need to address, and I think that would be your favorite character, the Red Tide King, or whatever you want to announce him as, of Cheth. Please tell me I'm pronouncing that name right, or is it Keth?
You are.
Cheth,
Cheth is
got that.
fine, yes.
How did you develop such a unique, I guess, multitude of characters or single character that is Cheth? Because I love the dynamic that you brought forth with that, especially when like comparing them to Phaedra.
Cheth is a combination of every villain I have ever loved.
Okay,
Like full
valid.
stop. And again, accidental, but at the same time, like I look back and I can kind of see the DNA sequencing of every villain that I've loved and been like, this was inevitable.
Yeah.
This is the confluence of so many different characters that I loved, and I was just like I loved spooky things and scary things as a kid, but I loved villains, and it was a problem. I I will call myself out. Another movie that I was obsessed with as a kid was The Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Okay, I see where this is going.
I love Frollo. I'm sorry, he's awful. I know he is.
Yep.
But so fascinatingly terrible as a person and a character, and the depth of the misery and nastiness. Like I think I was like 7 when that movie came out.
Okay.
And even then I was like, oh, this is something like special, but terrible special. So and there's been other characters that I've loved further on, like the character from Reboot who, changes her face with theater masks. Her name is Hexadecimal, by the way. She's awesome and she's my favorite. Cheth basically became like a reverse Hexadecimal because you have, Hex is one character. There's many personalities kind of in one character, and Cheth is one character in many forms.
Yep.
So it's kind of I think I was at the gym when I came up with Cheth as a character because I was on the rowing machine and I was thinking about the story. It was like the first 3 or 4 months of me even having an idea, and I was like, okay, do I want this story to have a villain? And I was immediately like, I don't know. Would it be more interesting if it was like kind of the high level concept of like there is no villain, it's just a sad situation, everybody is dealing with it in their own terrible way. But I was just like very quickly like, I need a villain. I need it or else I'm going to go crazy or not have nearly as much fun. And it kind of led into these questions of like, okay, why is the ocean the way it is? Because in the comic it is infested with ghosts. Yes. Like it is super mega haunted. And I was just like, okay, how did it get that way? And I settled on the rough idea of like there was some sort of conflict that opened up the afterlife and everything went bonkers and broke essentially. And I was like, okay, what kind of conflict can do that? And I was immediately like, okay, probably something involving gods or heaven and earth or something like that. And I don't know what happened. It was a very quick succession of like, okay, what happened with this, a god, like, I don't know, a god, made somebody mad and they broke him, and he was unfortunately the god of death. So everything involving death also broke. And what if he's still down there? And what if he doesn't have a body? And what if the only way that he can communicate with people is using all of the ghosts that are there. And I got out of the gym and I was like, I have to go home and I have to write this down. And I did. And I immediately, like, I did some stupid little sketches that they don't look anything like what he turned into, but the concept was there so quickly. Name popped into my head. I don't know where it came from. Sometimes you're just like, this just happens somehow, and magically there we go. So, but ultimately, like, then I had to figure out, like, okay, does he hop from ghost to ghost, or does he show up as a crowd? And I'm like, it's going to be cooler as a crowd, so I'm going to have to draw that a lot. And that's why the first chapter took me 3 years, because I was like, I have to draw him as a crowd in almost every panel, but I was just like, it's going to be awesome. And then I was like, I actually don't have to do it again in the same way. You'll notice that first chapter, I draw most of the ghosts pretty, like, detailed, and then they just become blobbier and blobbier in future chapters, because I'm just like, you know what I'm trying to say, you know who this is. But yeah, just the initial concept of, like, something that is broken and no longer has a form but has many now, like, something about that, I was just like, I'm rotating this in my head, like, fascinating, this is so interesting. And luckily people seem to have, agreed with me. It was so funny because when I first started posting the comic online and sharing things on Twitter, people really responded to Phaedra a lot more than Cheth.
Okay.
Partially just because her design is so kind of obvious. Like, she's a ghost girl and she's got, like, a cool captain's uniform. Maybe this is, a ghost pirate, and, like, that's something easy to latch onto. But people looked at Cheth and they're like, I don't know what that is. Like, it's a guy, he's got sharp teeth, and okay. But then people started reading the comic and they're like, I have to go tell my friends about this character.
I can see where people are coming from, but honestly, whenever you introduced Jeff, that's when we knew it was complete.
Oh God, I almost didn't do that. Because that was, I'll never forget, that page went up. I think it was like either the first Monday or something of, like, 2021. It must have been, because I think that was after the first year of the pandemic, and I was just like, you know what? We've all lost our minds. Let's have some fun.
There you go.
So I posted, that page of Jeff, and I'm just like, you know what? I don't know what people are going to think about this, but they're all just like, I'm sold. I'm here for this comic now. Like, they were already on board, but then they're like, I understand your humor. Yes. Let's go.
There you go. I was gonna say it led to, honestly, one of my favorite moments that I've enjoyed so far when it comes to this comic is, like, after the introduction of Jeff and Pavel, gets saved by the pirate crew and they're in, like, the ship or whatnot. And after, like, the one, meticulously long conversation, I called him Jeff.
That was Cthulhu all along.
I called him Jeff.
It's just like, well, he did. I mean, he kind of seemed to like it, It's fine. I'm sure he has a sense of humor. So.
It has the same energy of that one scene from the DuckTales reboot. I could have been Turbo.
Yes, that's right. Oh gosh, it's true.
Like that, it had me cracked. There's so many different moments that I'm just like, every time I've read it, I'm just like absolutely cracked, and I cannot get enough of it. But, like, on top of the moments where I've cracked, there have been so many moments where I have just been amazed and appalled with just the gorgeousness that is some of the illustrations sometimes. Mm-hmm. Like, that's another thing that I cannot get enough of this. I know you take your time to make sure the stuff looks good, but God damn, you do a fantastic job making this thing look phenomenal. Like, some of the details, like, especially with, like, the crowd of the ghosts in the sea or whatnot, or, like, how you articulate, like, some of the waves, like, crashing and stuff, or, like, the one big transformation that we saw in the most recent chapter. The amount of detail in the illustration blows my mind, and I am both thankful that you put in the time to do that, but also I'm curious, are your wrists okay with how hard you have to draw that stuff?
Well, I've got an arm brace, so it's actually not my wrist. I managed to get cubital tunnel as opposed to carpal tunnel, so it's my elbow.
I've never heard of that. I've always heard of carpal tunnel, but never was it cubital tunnel?
Cubital, yeah, and I just got an MRI for it like a week ago, so I'm just like, it's not that bad, but at the same time, like, there's damage that's happened, and I don't know. I'm lucky that I have I guess a workflow that, like, normally with comics you do pencils, then inks, then color. Mm-hmm. I don't do any inks. I barely do pencils. So a lot of times I'll just kind of do a sketch and then I'll just start painting right on top of it.
Okay.
So I am like, it looks like a lot of work and a lot of rendering, but it's actually pretty fast when I can kind of get into the groove of things. And a lot of the characters are designed in a way that facilitates that sort of art style. Like it's very Samurai Jack, I guess, if you can kind of think about it. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Like lots of color blocking, like very clear silhouettes. Like it's less about little tiny details, but when those details need to happen, it's either, a close-up of the character, or it's something around the character, or it's a background. So the characters themselves are actually kind of decently simple, and I'm very grateful for that, because I see some comics where like they design the character with like all these crazy things on their costume, and I'm like, no.
I mean, like, regardless, like, I like, for every new page that I get of Phantomarine, like, I am just so stunned with the illustrations. Like, just that alone, like, I cannot get enough of it. It makes me curious. For you, is there a personal favorite, like, panel or personal favorite, like, illustration that you've done throughout the entirety of the webcomic so far?
Gosh, my favorite. I've got a short list. Probably the one that I look at that I knew took the longest was it's the panel it's the second to last page of chapter 1, where it's just like Cheth is kind of going back down, and there's just a whole kind of giant crowd of ghosts, and they're all very detailed. It's like come back to me and sing forever in the echoing graveyard of the world, or something like that. And I'm just like, that's one that a lot of people actually point to as like, okay, I have to keep reading this comic, just because like the way that it's written and the way that it looks is like, it took me ages. And if you look at the posting dates of the original chapter, like they're months and months apart, because I'm trying to figure things out. But I really like, I like the first page of chapter 2 with the lighthouses. It's morning and you're first getting introduced to Pavel. I love that one. And that took a while too. Oh gosh, it's hard. There's a lot of individual pages and panels in chapter 5, which is the one where Cheth and Phaedra have a long talk and it goes poorly. Where there were that was the chapter where I had actually done kind of sketch pages 10 years ago of like what this scene would look like. So a lot of it just had kind of percolated in my head, and I was like, I know exactly what this needs to look like. And I feel like I would not have been able to realize it in the way that I had back then, because I didn't feel as confident with my art at that point, which is partially why it took so long. But now I'm just like, okay, I know how to draw these characters. I know how to deal with these expressions. I know even like the story, as I've kind of figured it out, has informed how all of this is going to go down. So I have a lot of favorites, and I save all of them as like little things where I can just kind of drop them in posts here and there and be like, I like this comic.
Yeah.
I'm glad that I make it.
I was gonna say, I remember you posting one, what was it, the other day, when the time we're recording this, of when Cheth had his arm on top of a Phaedra or whatnot, at the beginning of that conversation in chapter 5, like you were talking about. Which also leads me to obviously a very important question as well. Is Cheth a pretty girl?
Oh my, well, do you think so?
I think Cheth is stunning in any of the forms. Okay, look, like you've done a good job making Cheth a very attractive person slash being. I mean, give me Jeff alone, and I will be happy. Okay.
I'm actually very curious because I started posting. I got a little impatient. I started posting some pictures of it's an old drawing, but it's Cheth's original form. It's the giant bone fish, and I started posting that, and people were like, "This is the most attractive one," and I'm like.
Part of you is probably wondering, like, you know, I imagine part of you is like, oh, they've got to be joking, and part of you is gonna be like, oh, I hope to God they're joking.
But at the same time, I'm like, you know, I understand, like, people. I like this stuff. Like, I'm making a story about monsters and gods and giant beasts, and you find people online that are just like that. I like that. Like, they watch Beauty and the Beast, and they're like, change him back.
Yeah. You know what? Valid. Fair enough. I will say that for me, though, my favorite character is Lani. I love Lani so much.
Oh, you like Lani? That's great.
I love her energy. I love, like, how cheerful that she is, especially given the entirety of their circumstance more than anything else. I love that she is that, like, positive light, and especially with what we've learned with, like, the most recent chapter, I'm very curious on how Lani is going to be, like, you know, a key part of the story going forward more than anything else.
I'm sure she'll be just fine.
I'm sure she'll be fine. Nothing that she needs to worry about with, you know, potential relatives or anything like that. Yeah, it's no major deal.
No, she's just yeah. There's no character development or problems to go through there. Nothing. It's just it's gonna be fun.
I can only imagine. I mean, like, especially with what we learned with chapter 6 alone. Like, again, I already loved, like, Lani, like, well beforehand. Like, you know, reading up into this thing. I'm pretty sure I loved Lani, like, from the prologue, you know, forward or whatnot. But, like, especially, like I said, with what we now know, I'm not spoiling it because I want people to go into the description and read this webcomic if they have not, because it's a fantastic webcomic. But especially with what we know, it makes me so curious, like, just how vital and how key is Lani going to be, given what we know now. Hell, with any of the characters, considering what we know about some of the other people that are involved, given, you know, chapter 6 or whatnot, you have done a wonderful job keeping me at the edge of my seat, wondering what's going to be happening next. Which, like, you are doing a phenomenal job with the storytelling of this thing, more than anything else.
Well, thank you very much. I hope whenever somebody says that, I'm just like, I hope I can carry it forward, because, like, I know, like, there's people that will kind of hop on and off the comic every so often, and people come in waves, and, you know, they'll go read something else in the meantime. But I write for the intention of people coming back in, like, 4 or 5 years to be like, I have to see what happened, and then I hope I can just be like, here's your buffet of everything that I was cooking for you. I hope it's good.
Please enjoy these wonderful. We're not gonna say steamed ham because that's never done. Anyways,
exactly.
It makes me also curious as well. I know I talked about, like, your favorite art or illustration of it, but especially with the story that you've told so far, do you have a personal favorite moment or a favorite chapter or just a favorite interaction or whatnot?
Yeah. It's the moment in chapter 5 where cheth actually has to, like, scream at Phaedra and be like it's reaching a point where, like, they've been talking, and, like, these are two characters that are so opposed in every way, and even just the moment of them maybe reaching some sort of understanding or consensus or, like, peace, and then Phaedra is just like, to hell with that, and cheth actually has to, like, drop everything and just, like, actually actively yell in her face and let it go. And, like, I won't go. It's not been revealed in the story yet, but that's probably the moment. And then the moment immediately after that, where you see, like, this is a character that is covering up a lot of things with, like, kind of this snark and this humor. But at the end of the day, like, this is a very real, like, trauma that this character has gone through. Yeah. and you don't know the half of it. And essentially, like, my whole goal is like people have already guessed what the whole deal is, and I'm not changing the story just because people have guessed it. That is a bad practice.
Yes.
So I hope to basically reward people and be like, this is the moment where you finally see like the breaking of that mask, literally. And I guess just this sense of like, when you reread it and you go back, you're going to be like, I get it. Oh my God, I get it. And it's going to hurt real good, I hope. We'll see.
I will say, at least for me, when that moment happened in in the story or whatnot, that was the moment that more or less like clicked with me. Like again, I already loved Cheth beforehand or whatnot, but like that was the moment that clicked with me. Like, oh, there's way more to this. Oh, there's
Oh
a
yeah.
lot. There's pun intended with this, but there's a lot more depth than what we were expecting when it comes to this character, and I am intrigued to see where this is going. Like especially that, and once again, everything that happens in chapter 6, it makes me wonder. Like, oh, there's a lot more here than what you've already revealed. That's why I said like I love the storytelling you've told so far, because like it keeps me guessing more than anything else. Like, I think I have an idea of how it's going. Oh, wait, no, you're introduced. Oh, no, it's going like, oh. It's like, just when I think I have all the answers, you change the questions, and I love it.
That's what I would hope for. And like people can read it, and I have a couple of friends that read it, and they say that they don't have the brain cells to kind of put the things together, and they're just like, I just want to see these characters kiss eventually or something. And I'm just like, that's also incredibly valid. There is more than one way to read this comic, but it's the sort of thing where like if you're there for something that looks good, it's there. If you're there for something where the characters are fun, it's there. If you're there for kind of the horrendous mystery, have fun.
I was gonna say, with all these elements that you're bringing out to these people, especially with everything that you've kind of devoted to this, like you said, close to 10 years at this point, it has to be amazing. It has to be like outstanding, the reception that this webcomic has gotten in the first place. Like, are you more or less amazed with how much work you've devoted to this, just how much of a good solid fan base that has developed around this webcomic, and how much people are loving this and wanting to consume as much about this as they can?
I'm so happy. It's more than I ever thought it could be. I basically started it just being like, you know what, if I can make one person out there read this and have a good time, kind of like, the whole thing of like, if I find, one kid that has a toy in the airport, then I've done my job, sort of thing. Because that, at the end of the day, it really is just like, you don't need a huge fan base. If anything, I've seen it happen where that can be bad. And I think for something like this, like, the people that it's reached are they're so into kind of just feeling good about it, being positive about it, delving into it, respecting it, and respecting me too. Like, a lot of webcomic authors, they'll tell stories about people saying like, you're too slow, or where's the update? And I never get anything like that. Like, people just kind of, they trust that it's happening, and I hope that basically I've proven to them like this will be worth the wait. I know it's going to be a long wait, but I'm drawing as fast as I can, and it's the sort of thing where as long as I can get to the end and finish it and be satisfied with it, I really hope that other people really like it too. And I'm astounded. Like, I've done 2 Kickstarters now, and they've both been wildly successful, and I've got a hopping Discord that's full of people, and I'm so happy. Like, it's more than I could have asked for. And even then, like, you'll find people out there that are just like, I want more, I need more, and I'm just like, no, like, I find it better to have like a good, solid, vocal, passionate fan base of any size, rather than like just a massive one. And I'm just, like, there are people that probably would look at me and be like, you do have a massive one. And I'm like, but you haven't seen something, like the stuff that they have on Webtoon, which can go insane. But it feels big to me because of how active people are and how many people come in, want to contribute, want to talk about it. It feels alive. And that's really, really cool. Like, it's one thing to make something that people will read, but it's another thing to make something that people will read and talk about and think about and want to come back to. And it's awesome.
It absolutely is amazing. I mean, I've already gushed enough of how impressed I am with the webcomic. I can only imagine with the people you've been able to reach, how impressed they all are and how invested they have been. Like you said, there have been people that have already kind of figured this thing out, like from what you've been able to present, well before I even knew that Phantomarine was a thing. So.
Mm.
I can only imagine like the love and the passion, but also like the consideration that your devoted little fandom has more or less developed. The fact that they obviously understand, like, hey, you're a human being, you're taking your time. Trust me, I am like that as well. Like, I'm a patient person. I understand, like, especially with what you have been able to provide so far. If we need to wait just a little bit longer just to get more of this, I'm pretty sure we can all wait. I'm sure we can take the time, take a deep breath, and then like you're just gonna hit us with all sorts of just like gorgeous visuals, amazing moments, heartbreaking things. Like it's we are to quote a legend in the industry, our bodies are ready. Okay.
I hope so, and I hope I've got the hammer just perfectly like lined up to just like in the end. But again, affectionately, hopefully.
Oh no, obviously affectionately. It does lead me to ask this question, and obviously, don't spoil anything because obviously you want people to come back and be intrigued, and obviously I'm gonna come back whether or not, but. At this point, you're in a bit of a mini hiatus as we're recording this, but you plan on coming back soon. But when it comes to just Phantomarine as a whole, what should we expect from the future of it?
Ooh. Well, I'll do it for the near future and then the far future because I'm working on chapter 7 now, and this is where, unfortunately, again, webcomic time. Like I've promised an adventure for the past 6 chapters, and they're only starting the adventure.
Yeah, that's another thing I forgot to even mention. Like, we're only 6 chapters in, and we haven't even really gotten to the adventure part. But I am absolutely enthralled with everything that we have been given so far.
I had to do some setup first, and I eternally kick myself where I'm just like, you're selling this on the adventure, Claire, and they're not on the boat yet. I'm like, I know. We're getting to the boat, but they're on the boat, and this next chapter is now like the beginning of fun shenanigans, essentially. Okay. Mixed with some more lore stuff where people are gonna be like, okay, here's some more things to think about, or characters learning about what people already know, essentially, in the audience, which is always going to be fun. For the far future, though, I'll say, oh God, how do I say this? It's actually very difficult. I can give. I've already told this, I guess, on socials, but I'll say it here. I have a flashback chapter that might be 2 chapters, maybe more. And that's the one where I'm so excited. I'm going to go back in time and actually show like what happened and how things came to be. And there's stuff that happens after that chapter that then resolves everything, which I won't say what happens, but
right.
I'm heading towards ultimate devastation in terms of like feelings and emotions and story threads, and I've had it basically written in my head for 10 years now, and I'm just like I'm trudging towards it. I wish I could draw it like now. I've already started drawing like bits and pieces of it because I am that impatient, but people can anticipate like not just clear answers on what happened, but you will get to see it. And I really hope that it's as devastating and as wonderful as I hope it could be, because I started this whole comic not really knowing where it would go and not knowing what Cheth's story was. But there was a moment, again, I was working on Sausage Party and I was in the studio thinking about this, and I realized what would happen during that flashback chapter, and I started crying at my desk, which is like kind of a weird thing to do when you're working on Sausage Party. But at the same time, maybe not. I don't know. But just something where like I've been bottling up kind of this momentum for so long, and I hope that when I get to that point, people are going to be like, okay, hit me. And I'll be like, yes. We'll see.
Well, when that day happens, I'll be sure to paint the target on my face so you can get it right there and bullseye that bad boy. Uh, I mean, just thinking back to all that we've been able to talk about, whether it is with Phantomarine, the unique days of animation and stuff, thinking all the way back to when you first got invested in art with the weird Etch-a-Sketch-esque magnet drawing thing, or not drawing caterpillars and such, thinking to how far you've been able to develop as an artist. Like, just think of your art journey as a whole. Are you impressed and amazed with how far you've been able to develop as an artist?
I would say maybe impressed, maybe just more like, of course, like this was just kind of inevitable. Like from
Valid.
the start, there was always this kind of, again, water puns, this current pushing me towards all of this artistic stuff. And me trying to like resist it and be like, no, I have to do something else. But it just kind of like, no, this is what you were built to do, kind of. And it's good that, I tried lots of other things, and I I wanted to kind of have a broad spectrum of things I was thinking about. And I think everything else that I learned has fed into the art and the storytelling as well, which might be why it is at least seemingly so deep or detailed.
Mm-hmm.
So there's everything has kind of funneled into this project and into my animation career. So it's a I guess it just kind of becomes this nexus of like everything that I ever liked and everything that I ever responded to and thought was cool and wanted to work on. So in a way, I'm impressed, but I also am just kind of like, I don't know. Are you impressed that an apple falls off a tree and hits the ground? It's just like, it's fine to be like looking back. I'm kind of things that I've had to teach myself in the making of this comic,
Mm-hmm.
because there's so many things involving like marketing and even just drawing people. I didn't draw people for a very long time, and I had to kind of relearn that, and just every detail of that, where I think a lot of the success is because of everything that I've kind of learned along the way and been able to apply to this. So I don't know. I'm happy. I'm really happy that it actually has turned out this way, and I hope to be able to continue doing it for a long time. We'll see.
Good. Good. Honestly, you should be happy given everything that we've been able to talk about and the trials and tribulations, which is mainly just Sausage Party alone. Like the fact that you've been able to get to this point to where you've been able to put out this incredible web comic and have these people love and appreciate it, like it's got to be a satisfying moment at the end of the day to kind of have this like little mini triumph that you're still getting the opportunity to work on, and that you still love every single chance you get to work on it and talk about it and such.
Mm-hmm. I think the connection with people is probably the most important part, just because if you're making something, that moment where like you have brain to brain communication, being like, you
Yes.
understand what I like and what I'm trying to say, right? And they're like, yeah, I get it. So like it's really, really cool to be like going from having a couple people be aware of what I was making to then hundreds, if not thousands, being like, I can't wait to see all of this unfold. And I'm just like, I it feels kind of psychic in a way. Like I'm communicating what's in my head, and I'm communicating it well enough that people can be like, oh, I like this. Give me more. So it's really cool.
And for the people that are excited for more, you just gotta be like, well, buckle up, buckaroo. This is gonna be a wild ride.
Exactly, but that's the fun part.
Exactly. That is the fun part. So let's keep up a little bit of the fun with this next question, if I may. And Claire, if I may, let me give you more or less the dream scenario. Let's say I am Big Shot Mr. Moneybags. I come to him like, look, Claire, we know what you've been through. Trust me, we've heard all the stories. We have our ear close to the ground, and we've seen what you've been able to develop, especially with Phantomarine. Like, it's absolutely incredible and outstanding. We think there is more. There is a chance to do some more. You just need that little extra push, a little extra platform to get you there. We have access to everyone and anyone in whatever industry possible, and more money there should be possible. We really should be compensating the animators for the fact that they're on strike right now and they're trying to get that new contract. Hashtag stand with animation, like always.
Yay.
We'll focus on them in a little bit. We promise. We promise. Right now, we are focusing on you and you alone. If given this opportunity, what would be the dream Claire project, and why would it just be 20 different ways to retell the story of Phantomarine?
Do you mean like some like making the comic itself in animation, or?
I mean, again, this is the dream project. Like whatever you want to do, whether it is Phantomarine based or maybe something else based, like you have access to everything. We're just here to help make it a reality. What would be that dream?
I think it still would be. It's a funny thing because I have coworkers that want me to pitch it as something animated, and they keep trying to get me to do it, and I keep saying, like, look at how on fire everything is right now.
Yep.
Like even big projects are being subject to horrible things and cuts and all these things. Mm-hmm. But I feel like maybe I would love to like transport like 10 years into the future, and hopefully things have calmed down a little bit. And I feel like there was this great window of time at Netflix where you got all these projects that were kind of like, they're brand new IPs and kind of crazy and experimental, and that window just slammed recently. And I would love for that to reopen again someday, because I've even got like animation styles in my head. Like I've almost kind of structured the story as like a mini series in a way. Okay. Like you could chop it up into, 5 episode blocks or 3 episode blocks. Like I have it in my head kind of like that. So it would be lovely. I would love if I had infinite money and infinite resources and enough people where I could be like, okay, I know how hard this is going to be. Are you on board to help me with this? Like I've got, coworkers that are just like, we would work on this in a heartbeat. And I'm like, it's so sweet. But at the same time, I'm like, I know how difficult it is. Yep. But I think I would still jump at that opportunity if it did pop up and if somebody did email me and just be like, hey, I like this, can we talk? I'd be like, let's talk. Like at the very least, like I don't know. It's something I don't want to be cynical about because things are so on fire right now. Yep. And I know that, if people have dreams of having their stuff be made into a show or a movie, like you can't think like that right now, but you can dream. Yep. You can absolutely dream. And I think I don't think it's going to be like this forever. I really hope not. And I'm kind of just holding out for the moment where the fever breaks and things start getting a little bit back to normal. And we can introduce stories that people haven't seen before. Or like people have told me like, this is a pre-existing IP. It exists already. Like technically you could pitch it. And I'm like, that's true. But yeah, it would take a lot more at this point. And I know that it would, but in a fantasy world, absolutely, I would work on something like that.
I mean, I did say dream scenario. So in this dream scenario, yeah, we go forth with it. You bring on all your friends, and they're all compensated accordingly with the health benefits and all that stuff like that to bring this beautiful vision to life more than anything else. Mm-hmm. Also, if you need a voice for any of the characters, have Mike will travel. More than happy to do that.
Oh, I see. Gotcha. Who would you want to play, actually?
Like if I could find a way to get more of a gruff voice or whatnot, like I like just based on the characters that I've seen alone, I would love to either go with Cal or Silas. One of those two.
I can see you as a Silas. I could actually hear you as an Irving as well, honestly, in my head.
Yeah, that soft, that somber or whatnot, something along the lines of this or whatnot. Like
just like I don't want to be here right now. But he'll have his moments too. He's a secret sweetheart. So
of course. Yeah. I mean, we kind of saw that with the first introduction of Pavel a little bit,
Exactly.
Either that, or if I can get my barking down, Katja. I gotta get
gotta outpace Frank Welker. I guess he's still working, so we'll see.
If Frank Welker wants it, he can have it. All right, I'm not gonna compete against him. All right.
Exactly.
But sadly, we gotta get down from the dream scenario. We gotta get back to reality, and I'll ask the ever so generic question: where do you hope to see yourself in, say, 5 to 10 years from now?
Still working in animation, or if like I would love to. I honestly I would love to do this sort of thing full time, but I don't think it's possible. I think basically just on the same trajectory, it would be really nice. And just I would love to. I don't know how long it'll take me to finish this because I've already underestimated a lot of this sort of thing, but like lovingly so. Like I'm
Yeah.
just kind of like I'm just in it for the ride at this point. I think yeah, I would love to finish it within 10 years. That's my rough goal. Um and yeah, I'd love to just yeah, I don't know if something pops up in the animation industry that gives me an opportunity to work on something even like kind of like this, but in a more creative role. Because at this point, I'm still I'm an animation supervisor, which means I'm still beholden to like a director or I guess people doing more creative things than just like do the job.
Right.
It would be nice. I don't know. Yeah, it's funny. I'm actually pretty satisfied where I am right now. So if it just kind of continues in that same direction, and I keep animating and keep working on this and finish it, I'd be really happy. That'd be great.
I mean, if all you want in that amount of time is just more of what you've been able to do and doing more of what you love, who are we to complain? I mean, you've done a great job with the past 5 or 10 years alone. Like, seeing what you've been able to produce, not just with the webcomic, but what you've been able to do in the industry, for better or for worse. Like the fact that you've been able to still come out of it and still have the opportunities that you have. I mean, that's saying something at the end of the day. So,
Mm-hmm.
as we start to wind down the interview, I just have one last question I want to ask you. Obviously, as we talked about throughout this entire thing, you are deeply entrenched in art in one form or fashion, for as early as you can remember and even beforehand. How important is art, not just for you, but for the world as a whole?
Essential. We'd go mad without it.
Yep.
And I I lament so much of what's been going on online, especially just seeing things become like there's been a commodification of it forever. Like
Yeah.
that's what art can be. But I feel like people tend to forget like what in your life involves art, even if it's design. Like art by design is still art. Like you look at textbooks and you've got designers making it look good so you don't go crazy looking at your study materials. You've got signage, you've got all this sort of stuff where I think a lot of people, they'll think of art as something simple, something easy, and it's so much more than that.
Yep.
It's so broad, and it like if you look outside, like try to point something out that isn't part of art. And like it's not something where you need to work hard at it to make art. It can be very simple, but it's so human. And like to not have it be part of your everyday life, like there's no flavor. Where does all that flavor come from then?
Exactly. That is wonderfully worded, if I do say so myself.
Thank you.
Claire, that's all the questions I have for you. I've already showered you with a whole bunch of praise, but I'm gonna shower you with a little bit more because it's my podcast. I do what I want.
Thank you.
Like I said, I almost feel bad for getting into Phantomarine as late as I have, because like really ever since I first been able to dive into it, I'm glad I got into it more than anything else. I wish I had gotten into it sooner, but like I'm glad that I'm in it now more than ever, because ever since I've really invested myself in Phantomarine, like I have just been, another metaphor, I have just been hooked, line and sinker, just devoting myself already to like these incredible characters, this fantastic world, the gorgeous design and illustrations that you've been able to provide. Like I've just been blown away with every single aspect of this illustration. Getting the chance to talk to you, get to know more about yourself, and also like the love and passion that you clearly have for this idea, and how much you've been able to really grow it, and how much you still want it to how much you still love it, how much it's growing and thriving and surviving at this point. Like if I wasn't already excited, not just for Phantomarine, but for what you've been able to do, like, I'm absolutely hyped. I am bouncing at this point, like, just ecstatic to see what's going to be happening next. Not just with this incredible story, which, I mean, trust me, I'm waiting for every new page that we're going to get whenever it's ready, obviously. Please do not rush, all right? You've made it this far with how many years you've been working on it. The last thing any of us want you to do is to rush to get this thing done, because the quality that you put out there whenever you are able to put it out there, the level of storytelling, and hearing, like I said before, the love and the passion and the drive you have for this, like, I have a completely new ultimate level for you with what you've been able to produce, and I'm going to be excited for every new thing that you're able to have a hand in, whether it's with Phantomarine and otherwise, because I know it's going to have that high level of quality that I cannot get enough of. The long and the short of it, with all this gushing that I've been able to do, all I just want to say is thank you so much. Thank you so much for developing the story. Thank you so much for putting it out there into the world, for to see these people absolutely love and cling on to it and crave for so much more. And just know that whatever you're going to be doing next, I'm going to be right by your side, just like I'm one of the souls in the sea, although actually alive, excited and rooting for you every single step of the way, because I cannot wait for what's going to be happening, not just with Phantomarine, but for you in your journey. Thank you.
Thank you. My goodness, that's high praise. I hope not to disappoint. I aim not. I never aim to, and I never aim to even get close to it, because I have perfectionism in me that won't go away, and to my benefit and to my eternal curse. So I really hope that whatever I can do in the future just makes everybody happy and gives somebody just something cool to think about and look at. And again, art. Yeah. I want to put it into the world, and I'm glad that I can.
I'm not gonna lie, whenever you said that you had that perfectionism in you, I couldn't help but just think, okay, Phaedra.
There is, of course, like, sometimes fiction imitates reality a little bit.
Sometimes it's amazing how much artists put themselves into their characters. Just saying.
There we go. I've been on a journey like Phaedra's. She's gonna go on a journey, and it's I have experience with this sort of thing. It's gonna be fun.
Okay, that leads me that I could have just a whole nother podcast just talking about, like, just Phantomarine alone and all different aspects if I had the time more than anything else. But for those that may be curious on what exactly we have been talking about this entire, I don't know, 2 hours at this point, or however long we've been recording and whatnot.
It's been a while, gosh.
Go ahead and plug your stuff for the people at home. Where can people find more about Phantomarine and more about yourself?
Sure. The website itself, where you can read everything, is phantomarine.com. Phantom and Marine. The M is shared. It's all one word. You can find it. I have a Patreon. It's patreon.com/phantomarine if you want to just support or look at page previews or check things out or anything like that. I'm on socials everywhere as usually Phantomarine, or in the case of Twitter, somebody stole the username for me, so I'm Phantomarine _ on there. But yeah, you can find me basically anywhere. I've set up little shops wherever I can, and I just love talking to people. So yeah, send me messages, talk, read the comic, have fun. I'm here.
There you go. I sincerely hope people do take the opportunity, because I'll have those links in the description and some more in case you missed any or whatnot. Like, because once again, like, if you guys are not reading this comic, please do yourself the service and just go through and just read it. Like, it's absolutely worth it. And even with the amount of details and stuff in there, like, it's a very easy read. I will also give it that. You made it to where it's very easy for someone to get invested and to go all the way through with what's been able to be presented so far. So, like, people, if you're not already, please do yourself the favor, go through and enjoy the fantastic strip that's been presented so far. It does also lead me to one last question I forgot to ask so much sooner. How is Lani able to sneeze?
She doesn't know.
Do you have any final words before we sign off?
I think I've said too much, if not just enough. So I apologize for all my talking, if that's a
No,
problem.
no. This is a podcast. I encourage my guests to talk as much as they want. Trust me, even with what I have said or whatnot, this is not the longest podcast by a mile, all right?
Okay, good. Because
Yeah.
I was like roughly an hour and a half, and I'm looking at the clock. I'm like, oh,
No,
you
for,
blabbermouth,
for,
stop it.
for, I'll probably edit this little bit out right here, but for context, the longest episode I had was a artist by the name of Charles Zambilis, who is a character designer for like Spyro the Dragon, Crash Bandicoot, Jack
Yeah,
and Daxter
sounded
stuff.
familiar.
Yep. His conversation, we started at 8 p.m. my time, and we did not get done till 12. The episode was 3.5 hours long.
Oh boy, that's a little much.
So
But
you see why when it comes to this conversation, I was straight up like, no, we're perfectly good. Yeah,
gotcha.
but yeah, like if you have any final words, now is a good time to say them.
No, I'm good. I think I've said all that I wanted to say, if not more. So yay.
Then, if that's the case, all I've left to say is for the people at home, if you can, please pay your artists.
Tell me what's wrong, tell me sparks in motion. Sing me a song, tell me your eyes can all open. Show me it all, pick me up in the car you drove when you used to call. Show me it all.
Thank you so much for sticking around to the end. If this is your first time listening, I greatly do appreciate it. You can certainly tell from the intro how excited I was for this conversation, right? Claire, if you've gotten up to this point, thank you not just for taking the time to do this today because you were a fantastic person to chat with, but sincerely, thank you for taking the time to making such an incredible passion project at the end of the day. I cannot describe how blown away and amazed I have been with Phantomarine. I don't get me wrong. When it comes to this podcast, I bring on a lot of people that I am able to really express my love and passion for the product that they are putting out. But sometimes there are just some of those guests out there that I see what exactly they're pushing out. I get so hooked and addicted onto it, and I cannot stop talking about it. I love seeing that. I genuinely do. I love seeing people's like passion on full display, and I love whenever I'm able to be invested in it and get hooked, line and sinker, to be invested in such a thing because like you heard us talking about Phantomarine. It seems something so simple, but like also like it's really good. It's really incredible, and I need more. When the time comes, I will need more. I hope I'm able to not just explore more of that, not just for myself, but for the people such as you guys that love this podcast and want to see more of that stuff that excites you. I'm hoping I can get people that can feel somewhat the same way when it comes to this podcast with people that I'm able to bring on and enjoy that excitement to hear about a new artist or maybe their favorite artist that they already knew. I mean, I know it's exciting for me to get a chance to actually talk to these people and let that love and passion that they so much invest in their own product push it back out through our conversation. I can certainly tell with some of the different aspects that Claire Clam absolutely loves this comic just as much as I and a lot of people within the Phantomarine community love it. It just makes me excited for what's next, both with this podcast and obviously with Phantomarine. But it makes me excited for what's going to be happening next with this podcast because I've got some pretty good people lined up. I think I might surprise you with at least one of the guests I have lined up. That's all I'll say. Just well, that, and keep an eye out for the Halloween episode. But until then, keep up that excitement, keep up that love and passion that you have, just as I have the love and passion for each and every single one of you guys for the art that you push out there. You are doing phenomenal jobs, and do not let anything stop you. I mean, take breaks if you need to. Don't push yourself too far, but like, really let that love and passion flow. Really let the world see just how much you love and care about what you're pushing out there, because the world deserves to see it.